911, what's your emergency?
The following content is graphic, emotional, and includes dark humor that may not be suitable for all listeners. Discretion is advised. These stories are based on real-life EMS, military, and healthcare experiences. Calls are real, providers are real, names and details have been changed to protect privacy. They may be disturbing to some and are definitely inappropriate for HR department. Any medical or mental health discussion is personal experience, not protocol. Use your damn brain. Follow your local guidelines, and when in doubt, call med control. If you're struggling, don't do it alone. Talk to someone, a coworker, a friend, a therapist, or hell, reach out to me. I'll answer. Need help right now? Text or call 988 or visit 988lifeline.org. All right, welcome back to Dispatch Dysfunctional. This one's a little bit different for me. Today's guest is Brad Wolfe. So, Brad, before we get into anything, before we get into Reimagine, your music, your events, your titles, all the published internet good stuff, who are you really? Who are you at home as a husband and a father? Who are you as a friend? And what made this conversation feel worth saying yes to?
Thanks so much. No, that's such a great question, Chris. It's so good to meet you. I mean, I feel like all the all the parts of my life bleed together. I really believe in authenticity. So I I'm pretty raw and loving. That's I guess how I always see it. I have an 8-month-old daughter, my first daughter, and I have my wife and my parents and my friends, and I think I do a lot of work around loss and grief, and uh, all of it has really shown me and taught me how important it is to be present and to not wait to enjoy the moment and share love. So I feel like I'm just there for it. Like I love holding my baby. I love singing to my baby. I love making music. I love sharing that with, all the people around me and, um, and try not to sweat the small stuff because that stuff that doesn't matter as much as, remembering that there's part of us that's all the same.
I think that's a big part right there, like you just said, is the not sweating the small stuff. I think a lot of us, even, I'm sure you've worked with a lot of first responders. I think a lot of us do sweat a lot of the small stuff, even though it feels big to us, it's not. Um, I mean, I know you're doing a lot of work with people on that. Uh, Correct me if I'm wrong, but we sometimes feel as something small is a lot heavier.
I mean, it's so hard to remember what matters. I mean, it's like when I got my daughter just got sick for the first time and gave me the worst cold that knocked me totally out of the box, and
I miss those days.
I forgot in that time, y to exercise, for example. Now I'm exercising again, finally, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe how good it feels to exercise." It's so easy to forget. We swear off all kinds of things, and then when we get healthy, it's like we just forget how much we cared about our health when we didn't feel well. Or after a loss, after something bigger happens, it really crystallizes for us what matters. But then somehow, as life progresses, the small stuff just creeps in. And so it's more of like a practice, I would say, to keep talking to yourself about the small stuff and keep trying to remember in those hard moments, that that those small things really don't matter. And then, but it's not easy.
Right. 100%. And that kind of goes to what I got written right here is you wrote something on the form. You said life's most difficult experiences aren't interruptions to the journey. They are the journey. And that's huge right there to me because you're right. And like you said, the small things, even the small things in life are a part of our journeys. They kind of sometimes bring us down, but without the small things, we wouldn't have the big things, in my opinion.
I mean, I think it's so connected, all the moments in my life that have and that's the work that I'm trying to do really is help people see the connection between the lows and the highs, to see that the pain isn't something separate, I have a colleague named Jeannie, and she's going through ovarian cancer right now, and she said, "In life, it seems like all of these like, this diagnosis she had that it you would think that it just kinda came out of the blue. But what if we're living in the blue all the time? A diagnosis, a breakup, a a a challenge, they're all part of our lives, kind of they're inescapable part of the human experience, but we always treat them like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened." Yet it's it's pain happens for all of us, and so it's more like how do we respond, um, how do we respond to it? I mean, I lost somebody, my dear friend Sarah, and that was one of the worst parts of my life, but now I have all these songs that were inspired by her, and, um, and I'm out talking to someone like you because of Sarah, and it's, like, obviously painful, but there's so much beauty in the emergence of that relationship that's still connected to the deepest pain, and so I don't know, understanding that and knowing that for myself just makes life, I guess, richer.
That makes sense, and I can't remember who told me this at one point, but, uh, they told me that, without pain, we would always feel numb, and that was that hit me hard that day he told me that. As one of my partners on the ambulance, and he told me that, he's like, "Hey, look, you did everything you could. You're gonna feel pain about it, you're gonna feel grief about it, but without those, how do you know what you're supposed to feel?"
I think that's I mean, I have the same cognition, it's like if you're not upset or you're not grieving something, like, how were you supposed to feel? I mean, it makes it we should feel those emotions, otherwise, how are we really living? So I think that's a really can you say it again?
So, without pain, how would we know what to feel? We would feel numb without the pain that we feel every day, and that's how he told me is we on this call that we were on, we lost a pediatric patient, and he was telling me, "You're gonna feel the pain, you're gonna feel the grief." He's like, "But if you didn't, you'd always feel numb because without that pain, without that grief, you wouldn't have feeling. You wouldn't know what happiness is. You wouldn't know what pride is because you have to feel one to feel the other."
Yeah, and I think that's part of the big challenge that we have as a culture when we turn on the television and we have our own stuff going on in our own lives, and then you see how much pain exists everywhere, and it can just be overwhelming, and it's like, I don't want to. I don't wanna feel I don't wanna feel the pain, and so we just, like, go numb, or we numbify ourselves in some other way, and it's like, no, how do we stay open to feeling to feeling all those feelings? And that also, kinda sitting with our feelings, I have to say, being married to your point, it's like if my wife is upset, how do I just how do I just sit with it and be okay when she's in her pain, you know? I mean, or just like and vice versa. It's like it takes a lot of practice, and I think, and as a first responder, I know that that's a huge part of it. Is how do you sit with someone else's pain and not run, not numb, not divert yourself?
Right. And uh, our field is a little bit challenging on that at times, but um, we have people like you that help us. There's other people that we can count on, and the point of this podcast in the end is to show everybody, that there is help out there. There is people that understand us that aren't truly in this field with us.
Yeah, because it takes because how can if you were as open, if you if you felt the pain as deeply as a family member, if you felt it that deeply and you were in that much grief, you wouldn't be able to do the work. And so it's a really interesting balance of how to stay open, but at the and have it, not be numb, but not also have it be overwhelming.
It's a very fine line to walk, but yes.
Yeah, it is a fine line, and that's why having a support system like you're saying, and having relationships and people you can talk to, and having that perspective, I feel like is so key. Otherwise, either one of those two things can happen. So that fine line, I appreciate what you're doing because I feel like that's the line that we all need to learn how to walk.
I agree. And, you know, it kind of that brings me to my next point I have is you described your grief when you lost people when you were younger. You described your grief as almost unbearable. So who were they, and why did losing them uh, cause you so much pain from you know the purpose of having them?
I mean, I mentioned Sarah,
Yes, sir.
and she was someone I had just confided my love for her, and
Oh,
then 2 weeks later, she was diagnosed with this rare form of pediatric cancer, and so for the next 2 years, I played music by her bedside and sat with her and didn't know how to show up for somebody in pain because I had never been taught, how to grieve or how to, I death was very scary to me, um, and it's still scary to me, but I, thank God, had a guitar and found myself able to turn toward the guitar and write music with and for her, and for the other people in the room, and, I think through that, just my connection with her and with myself and with everything just got so much deeper. And so it was just a lot when when it when it when you lose somebody. Um, at the same time, I think the word almost is really important because it's like I'm not broken. I mean, I think just like going through those experiences and seeing that love can persist, gives me a lot of hope. Um, that, and I've now studied grief and learned that it's true that you can have ongoing relationships with people that aren't here, and those relationships can still change and evolve. And if you um, grieve with kindness uh, toward yourself and toward others, those relationships with everyone around you just get richer. And so that's the place that I find myself in now, and I'm just, you know, in awe of the journey.
that's very well said. That's amazing right there. And you actually made me think of something when you said that. So, we all have our outlets for our own grief. We all have our outlets for depression. It, we have outlets for everything, really. But as you were saying, you brought the guitar in for her and her family. Do you think that your outlet helped create a better bond in the end to show her that you were trying to grieve her in your own way at the same time?
I mean, that is become what you just said is really the work of the last 20 years for me, and what I'm really focused on now is how do we help outlets aren't inherently good.
Right.
Y you know, many outlets create so much more suffering and so much more pain, and even in the name of love, we can do things to hurt one another.
And say
Um,
that again right there. Say that one right there again.
even in the name of love, we can hurt one another and ourselves. And that's why I feel like this word kindness, like kind grief, I think it's so important because it's not about love, it's about kindness. And for me, music is one vehicle where for me, there was like a gentleness and a kindness that I was playing music for her, and there was something kind about that. There's all kinds of outlets. Um, if we think about the outlets that produce more kindness for ourselves, whether that's uh, apologizing to somebody could be an outlet. You know, I mean, any action that we take, it could be an act of service, of volunteering, but just gently, where there's like kindness involved. Um, uh, you know, service, all types of forms of creativity, even going to therapy could be a kind act for oneself, but something that benefits other people also benefits yourself. And so I felt like that's what I saw and playing music for Sarah didn't just help her physical symptoms. It also, is to your point, help mend my own heart. And so like what other avenues are there in life that have that same property as like helping somebody and also healing yourself, that us and our communities are intersecting. And if we grieve in that way, because we're all in pain, then instead of the world crumbling, instead of our relationships crumbling, it all kind of like rises together.
I love that theory. That's actually awesome. And I've always heard it from a bunch of musician buddies of mine that music heals the soul. Music can heal things that medicine can never heal. And you kind of proved that point right there in the end as well. You know, it's amazing that the kindness, like you said, can astronomically help someone in pain.
I mean, it's so interesting, now that I have this daughter and I'm play music for her and I see her reaction before any words to music. And it's crazy how it affects her body. You can just see it in her body. Her whole body is moving to the music, and when I get to a chorus, it goes in overdrive. Last night then, I was walking, there was a little street festival, and they had one of these, like, silent discos. I saw people,
Okay.
they're wearing headphones and, like, dancing, and I just was noticing people's bodies, like, moving, and it was so awkward, right? Because you can't hear the music, and you just see people's bodies, kind of gyrating around, and then it looked just like my daughter, and it's like, wow, look at the way that music is we have this thing in us that wants us to move awkwardly in these ways, and then you think about the person that made the music, the creation of the music itself, and especially if that music meant something, if there was emotions that were part of that music that were poured into it, that then are moving someone else's body, and that's such a deep idea. Like, I write these songs about my daughter, and it's, like, so precious to think that somehow that's what's that's where the music came from, and that's what's moving her body, whether it's about how much I love her or about her silly face and or even her bowels. Right, playing some funny music for her, and it's just, like, so awesome, that connection.
and it's interesting to me on that too. Is I think if you really look at it, um, no one doesn't listen to music. Everybody in the world listens to some kind of music, and a lot of people, when they find people that listen to what they listen to, they all they become friends, they become, you know, it joins people together, and that's awesome that you're doing that, and building a future for your daughter that way, and honoring Sarah that way as well. That's quite amazing.
I mean, thank you so much. I mean, it feels just say it, it feels really good, those parts of my life. And I, what Reimagine's work is to try to help everyone find their own music uh through the hard parts of life, because it doesn't have to be just playing music, even just listening to music or singing in the shower, that's music. But there's also service, there's just taking time to intentionally connect with somebody else and share your story. I mean, hearing each other's stories is can actually have the same effect. Just slowing down, being present, being intentional with our time, and channeling something hard into something loving in a new form is part of that 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 whole practice.
Yeah. So, why do you think it is that we treat the painful sessions of life like it's temporarily gone wrong? What do you think that is? Sorry, that just popped in my head.
No, it's a great question. I mean, I think because we it takes a different worldview to see to embrace pain as part of life. The natural instinct in our culture is just to push it away. So to say it's just a blip, it's just a blip is so much initially maybe psychologically easier for us. But the fact is, if we think we're all gonna die, we all suffer. So it's like holding that and integrating that is without our culture or like education honestly around it. No one teaches you as you grow up and you go to school, you learn math, but no one teaches you how to say goodbye. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's part of life that no one tells us how. That's why we all have these awkward goodbyes, because everyone's like, no one has skills around these things. And it's kind of, and maybe part of those skills are like spiritual skills, perhaps, that maybe used to be more in the spiritual realm, but now our world is so complex and crazy that and fast, and that we need as a you can see there's a lot of bad stuff happening, and it's like, why? And I think part of it is because if we're just trying to push away the pain and we don't know how to respond to it, we're likely to have that pain, come out in ways that hurt one another. And we go numb, and then we're not part of a solution. So I think I don't I think it's natural to want this pain, these things to just be blips and short term. But there is, when you let it in and you see it in the construct and you see that the pain actually connects to the good parts, and you really can learn that and see that those connections, then you're able to like say, okay, well, pain is okay, it is part of life, and I'm gonna have some really hard things. Like my I don't know what's gonna happen between me and my daughter and my wife, and the different kind of struggles that we're all gonna go through as a family, and sicknesses, and health challenges, and all kinds of other parts of life that are gonna happen between just us. And that's, uh, you know, kinda scary to think about, but I know that that's coming.
Yeah, and that's part of being resilient, in my opinion, too. Is we have to be resilient to be humans. And I've read it somewhere. Again, can't remember where I've read it from. But I've read, resiliency is you have to be tough. I don't believe that's 100% true. We all have flaws. We can all sit and cry. Sometimes that helps. Um, and how do you feel about that part?
I mean, I totally agree with you. I think it's like the definition of resilience, I think, in our culture is a little weird. Uh,
That's true.
because because, yeah, it's like, and there's a lot of now more and more research about this too, that if you're just resilient thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna be tough and not feel anything and just let it bounce off me like Teflon or something," that that that's resilience. But what research has shown anyway, one of the greatest predictors of whether or not somebody is gonna grow positively from pain is whether or not they're more open. Like that they're open to new possibilities. The more fixed we are, the more kind of tight we are, the less we're going to be able to let that pain move us to somewhere new that is a new possibility. If we just try to cling to what was and what is, that's where we get in big problems, because you can never we're always evolving and growing. We can't go back. We can't go back to exactly what it is. There's something new that happened to us, and we have to find ways to have that part of our life. Trying to get back is just a fool's errand, because you can try forever, but you can never go back, because even that trying is new. So it's like better to see where, what's possible now, um, in spite of the pain, or even maybe because of the pain. It's like I might be, when someone's aging and getting older and they're losing functions, it's like if you we all experience that kind of loss, or not, or if we're privileged enough to 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 grow into old age, we lose, function, and it's like we don't take the time to like mourn. Oh man, that's an actual loss. We just like, oh my, we just don't talk to we just pretend like nothing happened. But there's parts of ourselves that are getting lost, and to mourn those parts, but also then in mourning it to think about now what dreams, what matters most to me, what's most precious to me now, what's possible now, and there's still dreams for ourselves that we can move toward. So that's a long-winded answer to your question. I don't even remember what it was, but it feels like it all connects.
It does, and that kind of, I'm, so we talked earlier. There's all kinds of grief: divorce, jobs, isolation. Really, what types of grief do you think aren't really recognized as grief?
Oh, I think one of the major ones that we don't recognize, because obviously grief is mostly associated with death loss, right? The word grief, when people think of grief, they think of death, and they think of physical death. Um, you know, but grief is all around us. If we're sensitive and open to things, it's like there's constantly losses. Even, I mean, it's as my daughter as my daughter grows up and she changes form, it's like I get sad that she's no longer making the same sounds that she was making. I mean, part of her is changing, getting lost. And all these changes that we go through, there's like a grief associated with change, with any change. When you move to a new place, when a job ends, when you have to say goodbye to somebody, there's just grief is around us all the time. One type of grief though that I think is specifically understood or appreciated is this idea of like anticipatory grief. Uh, the idea that, if I think of, you think about someone you care about, eh, like my parents are aging and they're gonna obviously die at some point, and not pushing that away is part of the grief, or or not recognizing that there's some, not allowing myself to feel that, that we all are carrying this around with, not whether it's our parents or whether it's with our, ourselves, that we're all going to die, that there's an existential kind of like feelings we have that people walk around with that are hard to talk about, because no one wants to talk about that stuff. And keeping it in can kind of like weigh on you, especially when you have a lot of other things going on. If you're like a caregiver, um, there's this anticipation toward death that is grief in advance. And we don't have to wait till after someone dies to tend to our grief. If we start tending to it now and treating it with kindness and interacting with it, it can help us metabolize, at least I believe, those losses that do happen. And it can change the way that we act now to make life better today. And it might even change the way that those losses happen, and or prolong things, that otherwise wouldn't be there in certain ways. I mean, I think about just if you think about anticipatory grief and you think about, oh my gosh, is the world going to be around? Is like, what's going to happen? Oh my gosh, it's so scary. It's like, well, that's a lot to hold, thinking about what if all this didn't exist. It's like, well, knowing that, how do I want to live, thinking that that might be a reality? It's like, what behaviors might I engage in? How might I embrace life differently if I actually took time to think that we're all going to die?
Yeah, that's actually a very deep perspective there.
That's why it's like, yeah, but we're all actually a little, some piece of, maybe some people never think about this, but I think all of us kind of have these thoughts sometimes. So it's like, whoa, what do we do with that?
Very true. So, one final question for you. So picture the people we've been talking about the whole episode. They're awake at 2 a.m. because their mind won't let them rest. Maybe they've recently lost somebody they love. Maybe they're just caring for a parent, or maybe a marriage ended. Health changed, their job changed. Maybe they're still showing up, still doing what everyone expects them to do, and still being dependable, like most first responders do. But in the end, privately, they're feeling disconnected from the life they thought they've had. They're pretty much grieving their own life that they've lost. Everybody thinks everyone's holding together when that happens. They are carrying the grief, the regret, and uncertainty that no one else can see. So, what do they need to hear from you today or tonight when they listen to this?
Man, I think they need to hear you, and see, like, that we're not, just naming what you said, we're not alone in that. Everyone experiences that feeling. Sadly, in our culture, we don't know how to talk about it. But so just because we don't know how to talk about it doesn't mean that we're alone. That you know, that is, sadly, that is part of life. And that's okay. And so it's okay to be sad, and it's okay to be kind to yourself and gentle, and to see how much you're carrying, and to know that there is a lot of pain, but we still have a choice about ultimately how we respond in terms of where we direct that painful energy. And if you can keep taking small, tiny, sweet steps towards kindness towards yourself and towards others through that pain, it gets better.
Yes, sir. Everyone just remember, as well as all of us feel pain. We all have grief. We all have pain. But the same gentleman that told me that before, I was contemplating suicide, and he told me one thing. He said, pain is only temporary. He said it may be temporary for years, months, but it's only temporary. He's like, you're gonna do a permanent fix to a temporary problem. And that's something I want to let everybody know is you're never let your grief win.
Amen. Honestly, and the one thing I'll say about that, and this is so I find this really helpful in those moments for myself, and I'm so grateful for your friend, first of all, because I love talking to you.
Thank
Uh,
you.
like, if you when you're in pain, if you just sit there and you close your eyes and you say, I'm in pain," and try to just see that the pain is there constantly, there will be a moment in your day where that pain's not there, where even in a short span of hours, you can't even stay in constant pain for every second. There's something else that comes in. Even when you're like, "I'm in pain." Yes, you are in pain, but even when you try, there's some blip of something else that comes in, and if you kinda, like, think about that on a macro scale, that, like, even when we try our hardest to be in pain, there's some signs that there is something else. And I don't know, that helps me, and sometimes when I'm in pain, I'm like, "I'm gonna just try to sit and just be in my pain as much as I can." And then I get surprised when I'm like, "Oh, actually, there was this one little moment when I wasn't in that same when somehow I was distracted from that pain, when something else got in the way of that pain." And then I'm like, "Wow." Then it helps me remember, "Wow, if that one little moment is there, how do I just, like, start noticing more of those moments and seeing if I can expand those moments?" And then ultimately, it gives me some hope.
Very true. If people want to learn more about you, Reimagine, find your music, Brad Wolf and the Moon, how can they find that information?
Sure. So you can check out this music that's related to all these themes at Brad Wolf, BradWolfe, .com, bradwolf.com. And then we invite anyone to be part of this community that we have at letsreimagine.org. Letsreimagine.org. We host thousands of free events online for people to show up in all kinds of different ways and connect with other people about whatever you're going through. And they're also semi uplifting, I have to say. Like, people leave feeling more connected and more alive, even when the events kind of touch on some of these hard themes. So I really recommend showing up. You don't even have to participate. You can just show up, and um, it helps you know that you're not alone. You meet some people maybe if you're interested, and also learn some things. But there's rituals, there's things that kind of there's music, there's different types of activities that you can find in these. We've hosted 5,000 events now, uh, and I think just invite you to peruse that event calendar. And we're also building a new social media tool. This is what's so exciting, where we people are, like, more authentic and honest about what's happening in their life, and we're not judging each other. We're just uh, kind of sitting with what is, and everyone's on their own journey toward figuring out how to channel these hard parts of life into something a little bit kinder. And so that's something you can find as well at letsreimagine.org.
That's cool. Yeah, Brad, thank you for trusting me with this conversation. This has been Dispatch and Dysfunctional. You know, the hardest parts of life are not always interruptions. Sometimes they are the journey, as you said. Grief isn't always a funeral, and sometimes it's a relationship. Your health, your confidence, your identity, the future you thought you were going to have. Sometimes things can't be fixed. Remember that. And on my ending note, I know people are getting tired of hearing this, but if you want to support me to go to a critical care course, please hit me up on the website. Uh, all my funding fell through, so hey, y'all have a good day.
We got to support you, Chris. This is a really special show, and I appreciate you.
Thank you. I hit stop. If you think it's too heavy to say it anyway. It beats a eulogy. You don't have to apologize for surviving however you can. You're not the reason things are heavy. You're the reason they're still moving. Need support right now? Reach out to me. Reach out to somebody. Text or call 988 or visit 988lifeline.org. You're not alone, not in this job, not in this fight. Want to share your story or connect? Visit critical-run.com or message the Facebook page, Dispatched and Dysfunctional. We're building this for you, for them, for all of us.